Good evening, everyone. I'm going to call this Committee of Adjustment hearing to order. Before we get started this evening, I'm just going to go through the protocols for tonight's hearings. Tonight we have 6 applications for 5 identified properties that we'll be hearing. The following will be the procedures for tonight's hearing. There's copies of the notices at the back of the room that will list each one and what properties they are. Just a couple housekeeping items for those that have cell phones. If you could please place them on silent mode or turn them off, that'd be greatly appreciated. And for anyone that wishes to speak to applications, please address questions through the chair and not directly to the person being asked the question. The first order of business that we will go through is to ask any committee members if they have any conflicts of interest with any of the applications that are on the agenda this evening. Following that, a request will be made for any deferrals or withdrawals of applications that are on the agenda. The Secretary-Treasurer will read out each application noted on the agenda with a brief description and staff recommendation. And where we have multiple applications for the same property, they will be done probably in unison at the same time. The applicant or the agent for the applicant will be asked to come forward to the podium on my right, your left if you're in the crowd, and be allotted a short overview to add any further details that they wish to add at that time with regard to the application. Members of the committee will then have the opportunity to ask the applicant any questions that they might have, followed by members of the public that wish to speak to an application. Members of the public wishing to speak to an application will be asked to come forward to the podium on my right. State your name and address for the record. Try to limit your comments to 10 minutes and must present all questions or comments that are pertinent to that application or applications, if there's multiple for the same property, in that time frame. Persons making a presentation may not necessarily be allowed to return again to speak to the same application. Following all comments, the applicant will be afforded some closing comments if desired. The committee will then present a decision in the form of a motion. The motion will be discussed and voted upon. If a vote is tied, a motion will be defeated, and new motions will be made until a decision has been reached by the majority of the committee members that are in attendance this evening. Notices of decision will be provided to those persons who leave their name and address in writing with the Secretary-Treasurer. At the back of the room, there's a sign-in page for that purpose. For those viewing online, you can email our Secretary-Treasurer, Taya, at tay.taraba, T-A-R-A-B-A, at portcolborne.ca, or you can call 905-228-8124 immediately following the hearing and leave a message requesting the notice with your name and address and contact information. Trusting everyone understands the process, I will ask first if there's any conflicts of interest of any of the applicants or applications this evening from any members. Not seeing any. Is there any request of deferrals or withdrawals of applications that we've received? Not seeing any. So with that, Madam Secretary, the first application, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. On tonight's agenda, we have 2 minor variance applications and 4 consent applications. Notice of the applications were circulated to the public on August 26th. The required agencies received notice of the applications on August 11th. A recommendation report for these applications were prepared by planning staff and made publicly available on September 5th. All correspondence received by September 5th were addressed in the recommendation reports. Those interested can view the recommendation reports online on the city's website or in person at City Hall. Those interested may also contact planning staff in person, by email, or over the phone to obtain a copy of the reports. Accommodations for alternative methods of viewing or obtaining the recommendation reports are available upon request. Please note that the zoning bylaw currently in effect is the City of Port Colborne zoning bylaw 6575/30/18 as amended, which will henceforth be referred to as the zoning bylaw. To make a revision on record, kindly note that application B0725PC had a clerical error concerning the posted planning report where an outdated version of the sketch was used. Please note that the updated version of the sketch was posted with the agenda and that the report was written with the newer sketch in consideration. These applications, which are to be introduced later in the hearing, concerns B0725PC, which aims to sever parts 1 and 3, and B0825PC, which is a boundary adjustment concerning parts 2 and 4. Our first applications for tonight are consent applications B0125PC and B0225PC for the lands municipally known as 484 Barrack Road. The agent Denise Landry, on behalf of the owners, the trustees for Christian Life Assembly, requested a consent to sever for the purposes of creating a new residential lot and to retain the environmentally protected land. The subject parcels are shown as parts 1, 2, and 3 on the proposed sketch. In B0125PC, the application refers to parts 1 and 2, whereas in B0225PC, it refers to parts 1 and 3. Given the recommendation report, planning staff recommend that prospective consent applications be granted, subject to the conditions outlined in the staff report dated September 5th, 2025. That concludes correspondence for these applications.
Thank you, and I believe the applicant is online. Hello?
There we go. Can you mute for a second, man?
Are you doing the same thing there that I'm doing?
Yeah.
I'll leave it to you.
Thank you. Can you
Yeah.
you could stay muted. I hit the wrong one by accident. Thanks.
If you can hear us, you're still on mute, so we can't hear you if you're trying to talk. All right, I tell you what, we'll adjourn this application. See if we can figure out what the technical issue is, and maybe we'll go to the next application.
Sure, no
and then we
worries.
can jump to that one.
Our next application is minor variance application A1325 PC for the lands municipally known as a vacant lot on the corner of Second Concession Road and Snyder Road, located in the agricultural residential zone as established in the zoning bylaw. The owner, William Kemp, is requesting relief from the provisions of the zoning bylaw to permit the construction of a new detached dwelling notwithstanding the following. That a maximum lot coverage of 22.5% be permitted, whereas a maximum lot coverage of 10% is required. That a minimum corner side yard setback of 5.67 meters for the new residential dwelling be permitted, whereas a minimum 7.5 meters is required. Given the information in the recommendation report, planning staff recommend application A1325 PC be granted. As the application is minor in nature, it is appropriate for the development of the site, it is desirable and in compliance with the general intent and purpose of the zoning bylaw, and is desirable and in compliance with the general intent and purpose of the official plan. That concludes correspondence for this application.
Thank you. Is the applicant here this evening for that application? If you would, you can come forward to the podium on our right. In the middle of that gray bar on the desk there should be a red button. You can just hit that to activate the microphone. And is there anything further you'd like to add at this time?
No, sir.
Very good. Does anyone have any questions of the applicant? Not seeing any. Is there any members of the public that wish to speak to this application this evening? Sir, if you would, if I can just get you to move off to the side. If you can come up to the front, just your name and address for the record.
My name is George. Who you?
To the mic, please.
Just watch your head.
My name is George Beaulieu. I live at 644 Second Concession. Just next slide over.
Like off of.
Not the guy with the pool. I'm one with the big garage.
Oh, okay.
That's me. Okay. This picture, I want to understand. The blue, that's the whole house?
No, that's the property.
Well, that's the property.
Yeah, that's the property.
And where you gonna put the house?
So the house is basically.
Sorry, if I might, just if you can kind of just move, if you could just address the questions through
Oh,
us.
who, me?
Yes, through the chair, and we can follow up with the applicant after that to try to answer your questions for you, okay?
All right.
So just ask your questions and we'll pass them through and,
Okay, it's a small lot. I got no problem building houses there. It's the neighbor might have a problem. So I want to know the zoning is, why don't we call that the property line? That's why I want to know where the property line is. But I got no problem, buddy.
No, I can answer that.
so if, just to first off address some of your questions. So the blue box that you're referring to, I'm assuming is in the staff report?
Well, I don't know if that was the whole house or not.
Okay, so that's the entire property.
That's no problem.
That's correct. So as part of the staff report, there was a sketch provided, which was, I believe, also on the notice that you should have been mailed, showing the house and the proposed dwelling that they want to build there, accessory dwelling. Okay? So with that, I will turn it to the applicant if you want to address his questions.
Well, he's obviously going to be my neighbor there, so yeah. Basically, I talked to you?
Yes.
Okay, I apologize. Basically, all three, there's 4 different setbacks, obviously. The setback to my neighbors, which would be, I believe, west, and the north-south. This is the east-facing setback. So basically, we've met all criteria on all 3 different setbacks. The only one I'm asking for forgiveness on is A, lot coverage from 10% to 22, as well as the 7.5, and I'm asking for 5.67. I've also pushed that house all the way far back to avoid any kind of, viewing or turning issues that could potentially happen by moving the house closer. So, even the pool setbacks, everything's set to, there's nothing else I've asked for.
So I'm a touch confused now. So as far as the application that you're bringing forward is for a,
That's for nature. This is concession two. This flip phone.
oh, sorry. I apologize. The sequence of the applications in are reversed.
Oh, so you're just,
So hang on, so I was thinking of the wrong property, just, give me a second here. So you read out A13? Okay. Now I'm on the right page. Okay, so, to your point, now I understand what you're going with, the garage and the height and so on, or the maximum lot coverage and so on and so forth.
Yep.
So, sorry, please continue with
problem.
where you're at.
That's basically all I have to say. The house is set back. It's got the proper septic that's designed for that size house. And all setbacks are met other than the Snyder facing road setback, which I'm asking for forgiveness for.
Okay. I was, on that particular property, there is a fence that goes all the way around the property.
That will be getting removed after the project's completed. I'm gonna
Okay.
keep that on based on my experience in construction. I mean, I've had a lot of theft on
Yeah,
certain
yeah.
sites, so I'm just gonna keep it for safety as long as I have to, and then it'll be removed or replaced.
And the existing buildings, I don't know how to describe it, are they more like a garage kind of thing that was?
I think the old owner had like a chicken coop or something on there, it'll look like. Yeah, we did an archaeological dig on there as well, and there was nothing found on that property, so
Okay.
everything seems to be pretty good.
So was there a house at one time?
I don't believe so, no, I think it was always used as a chicken farm, or a chicken, or, yeah. It's zoned, and sorry for your last question, I didn't answer, it's zoned agricultural residential.
Well, Joe had a garden, that was all garden.
Okay, there was never a dwelling there, a house?
No, there's 2 little chicken coops right
Okay.
now.
He's had a chicken coop and a shed for his garden.
Very good, thank you. Does anyone else have any questions? Is there anyone else from the public that wishes to speak to this application? Not seeing any? And if there's no other questions here, is there any further comments you want to add at this point?
No, sir.
Okay, thank you. So, has anyone got a recommendation? Dave? There's a pile right there. A13.
Sorry, I'll turn the microphone on. In the matter of concession 3, part lot 23 in the city of Port Colborne, vacant lot on the corner of concession 2 road and Snyder Road. A13-25-PC be granted for the following reasons. The applications are minor in nature. Are we,
Hi, Taya. I can't hear you, just so you know.
do you want me to read out the whole thing or just?
Just hold on. Okay, sorry, go ahead. Continue.
So we just want to go with the titles, the applications are minor in nature, or the whole thing?
You could just go with the titles and we'll reference the staff
Okay,
report.
1, the applications are minor in nature. 2, they are appropriate for the development of the site. 3, they are desirable and in compliance with the general intent and purpose of the zoning bylaw. And 4, they are desirable and in compliance with the general intent and purpose of the official plan.
Thank you. Can I get a seconder to that, Eric? Any questions or comments? Let's see. You good? All those in favor? That'll be carried. Thank you. There is a waiting period, 20-day waiting period. After that, you should be good to go. Thank you. Okay, so we're going to go back to the first applications, BO1 25PC and BO2 25PC. I believe we have the applicant now on board, and I'll turn it over to Denise online.
I can't hear anything.
Can you hear us now? Can you hear us now?
Oh, yes, I can.
Okay, just before you get started, because you're coming in online, you don't wish to defer or withdraw your application this evening?
That is correct.
All right, the floor is yours.
Thank you. I'll just share my screen. Or just bear with me a sec. I'm having to send a request, Taya, to share, so I'll just hit send request. Okay, thanks. I see that. It'll work now. Perfect. Okay, I'll start. Thanks. Good evening, Chair, committee members, and members of the public. My name is Denise Landry, and I'm a principal planner with Netherite Planning. We were retained by Dunsire Properties to obtain consent of the lands at 484 Barrick Road to facilitate 2 severances of the property. Now, the property is located at the corner of Barrick Road and Westside Road, and it includes the existing church, the vacant land behind the church, and the woodlot. There are single detached dwellings adjacent to the property located along Barrick Road. We have applied to the committee to create 2 parcels. Parcel 1 is where the church is and will remain in the ownership of the church. Parcel 2 will be used for future residential development. Access to Part 2 from Barrick Road will be through the purchase of an existing lot fronting onto Barrick Road. And Parcel 3 in the south, which is the woodlot, is going to remain in the ownership of the church. We have submitted an application as well for an easement in favor of Part 1 over Part 2 to permit them access to Part 3, as Westside Road is within the jurisdiction of the Ministry of Transportation, and they will not permit any accesses to Parcel 3 from Westside Road. The purpose of the rezoning application that we've applied for is to establish the minimum lot frontage and minimum lot area, and that's in order to facilitate the 2 consent applications before you this evening. The institutional zone in the city's zoning bylaw identifies the minimum lot frontage and lot area requirements as existing, as you can see in the bottom right-hand corner of your screen. This hinders the ability to seek consent approval to sever the parcel into three properties. So we are requesting through that amendment a minimum lot frontage of 50 meters and a minimum lot area of 1.2 hectares, and that's to align with our proposed severance applications. The lands are located within a settlement area, and the PPS directs growth to these serviced areas. The lands are designated built-up area with significant woodlands and identified as an area of archaeological potential in the region's official plan. The Colborne official plan designates the lands urban residential. The 2 policy documents support growth within this area and permit the severance of lots for future development. The lands are currently zoned institutional with lot frontage and lot area minimum requirements identified as existing in the city's zoning bylaw. The purpose is to introduce a minimum lot frontage of 50 meters and lot area of 1.2 hectares to support 2 severance applications. And no changes are permitted to the list of permitted uses or to the actual zone category. This application is intended to support future intensification of the vacant land. It supports key policy directions in the PPS, the Niagara Official Plan, as well as the Colborne Official Plan. Thank you, Chair and committee members, for allowing me the opportunity to present an overview of the applications before you this evening, and I'm happy to address any questions or items of clarification that you may have.
Thank you. Any members got any questions? Dave.
Thank you, Chair. Through you to the presenter, just a couple quick questions. One, you said that the frontage will be 50 meters. That will be fronting on Barrack Road.
Through the chair to the committee member. So the 50 meters represents the smallest lot frontage that we're creating, which would be the parcel 3, which is the wood lot. So it's actually along West Side Road. And so with our survey, we've got it at 51.51, but for rounding and just to ensure if there's any changes while we finalize the survey, we've requested 50 meters. I'm happy to pull up the slide again to show you, committee member. So there's the 51 meters. So any lot touching a right-of-way would be considered the lot frontage. Well, the smallest lot line if this was touching more than one. So that's why we've applied for the 50 to make sure that parcel 3 will comply.
Okay. What about parcel 2?
So parcel 2, right now it's just this piece and it's got 163 meters adjacent to West Side Road.
Okay.
And so it doesn't go up yet to Barrack Road. The idea is that the client is in negotiations to purchase this property here, and then it would merge with the overall parcel 2.
Okay. And once that parcel is acquired off of Barrack Road, that will be the entrance to parcel 2?
Through the chair, yes, that would be the intention, as we are not permitted access off West Side Road.
Okay. My other question is, the fire department in staff comments requires the subdivision to have 2 entrances. Where would your second entrance to the subdivision be?
Through the chair to the committee member, my understanding is that the second entrance, if needed, would be off West Side Road, but not an official entrance. I also understand that the fire department was satisfied with having the access off Barrack Road with the parcel also along West Side Road, but I may defer to your chief planner to further comment on the fire department's comments.
Yeah, could we get clarification on that, Herc?
I think through the chair to the member, how the access is achieved in the future. I think the fire comments are directed at the potential for future residential development, which at that time is not something that we have an application for in the planning department. We've got the application for consent, and then we have an application in right now that'll be coming before council shortly for a rezone to institutional. It's not a rezone to residential. So it is the applicant telling us right now that their intention is to develop this property for residential purposes, but in reality, we're not in receipt of anything that guarantees that is the future use of this site. So the fire comments were related to a proposal for residential development, but if we don't have residential development, then the fire comments likely would change if we were going to end up seeing a commercial proposal for that site or something different.
So as of this moment,
At this moment.
that comment from the fire department is moot.
Correct.
Okay. Those are all my questions.
Thank you. Gary?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Actually, that answer was the first half of my question that Member Elliott raised, that right now, this is about the woodlot and the church property and access to the woodlot and the requirement for a second entrance. Should there be permission granted for that subdivision, will be dealt with separately, and it's looking like they may need an access onto Highway 58. Okay, great. So my other question is with respect to the easement. I didn't see, Denise, your arrow, but the easement is going to track parallel to Highway 58 and then come across to the woodlot?
Through the chair.
Sorry.
No worries. Through the chair to the committee member, the intention right now, and as we've applied for it, is just to do a blanket easement across parcel 2 in favor of parcel 1, and not specifically identifying a parcel over parcel 2, but in fact just providing the blanket easement across the entire piece.
Very good. I understand now. So, and the easement may not even be on potentially an internal road, because it's not necessarily a road going to it. It's a swath of land that can get to the woodlot. Is that correct?
Yes, through the chair to the committee member, that is absolutely correct. As we move forward with the next steps of the development, that's when we would assess how that easement could look and if it possibly needed to be adjusted.
Great. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Eric, do you have any questions? No time like the present.
Through you, Mr. Chair, to, I would say, our chief planner. I guess where I get a little hung up is on the conditions that we are proposing, that the applicant provide a written undertaking that access to Part 2 will be from 434 Barrack Road. I guess I'm wondering what sort of legal mechanism is in place to enforce that condition. I mean, the applicant could provide a written undertaking, but if they don't follow through on it, what recourse do we have?
Through the chair and the member, yeah, no, that's a great point. We have very little recourse once the lot is created. Other than, to require, we could require a merge, right, of the additional dwelling that was bought on Barrack Road with Part 2 to provide access. I mean, there's a number of ways we could do it, but
because the way I see it right now is there's potential that, I don't know, correct me if I'm wrong, that they could end up getting the approval and clearing all the conditions without there being an access to Barrack Road. That the applicant apply for. Sorry, I'm just going through the.
If I might, we can add that as a condition, that property has to be purchased and merged, otherwise they don't get their consent.
Well, that's kind of what I'm looking, that we need to have something that's a little bit stronger that they, but but 2A, for access to Part 3 over Parcel 2. Okay, yeah, I think there needs to be something a little bit stronger that makes sure that, but it doesn't necessarily need to be that property. Maybe there's another property they can get access to from Steel or whatever, but there needs to be an access to Part 2 directly.
That would be suitable for an access point for, utilities, sewers, water, blah, 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 access, road access and the like.
Yeah,
Yes, 100%.
so,
I would concur with that, adding it as a condition to, that has to be part of this at the same time.
yeah, so that's my only concern.
Okay. Any other questions? Not seeing any more of the committee members before we go to the public. I do have a few questions that may or may not have been answered that I've addressed to staff that I didn't get a good response from. With regards, I guess just a little bit of housekeeping. I noticed online that the authorization form wasn't signed. I'm assuming you have a signed authorization form?
Yeah.
We should really get those posted on the website so that we know that the applicant has the authorization to act on the owner. That's number one. Number two, I'm assuming the signs got restored to the two properties when I visited there on, I think it was Saturday morning. Maybe it was Sunday, I can't remember, but the two signs were down. I don't know if the wind had blown them down. I stood the one up that was near the parking lot. I couldn't reach or get to the one that was behind the property facing West Side Road, but they didn't seem like they're that far into the ground. I don't know if the ground was pretty hard, pretty dry still, but I'm hoping that situation was rectified. Were they notified? Okay, so I did send staff an email on Sunday requesting that the applicant be notified to put those signs back up, as they weren't, I don't know when they got knocked down. I just know when I went there on the weekend, this past weekend, they were both down. The third point, in reading the application, I guess just for you kind of alluded to it a little bit earlier, but just for the public's benefit, application B1 is basically to create parcel 2, which is the mid part, and application B2 is to create the woodlot at the back end, just for those that are in question with regards to that. I guess if you go through the staff report, you'll see that and understand that. To your points about the fire department. So the applicant mentioned that you can have access to 58 with regards to addressing that. Is that what you stated? I'm assuming it would be like a blocked entrance that with maybe the chain that the fire department would have access to, that if you needed to, they can cut across and come into the property. Is that the intent? Is that something that is acceptable to the Ministry of Transportation with regards to an entrance like that?
To the chair, I have seen that as an acceptable option, but as sort of the chief planner mentioned, we would have to deal with that through the next phase of the work that we're undertaking.
So the reason I raised that point, and similar to my colleague's questions about an access point to Barrack Road, if we were to grant this and all the other conditions being met, and then you find out afterwards the Ministry of Transportation won't allow you that access, and then you only have one point of access, maybe off of Barrack, with the lands that maybe you're going to merge with this to gain access, we've just created a sterile lot that you can't really do anything with, potentially, other than, I guess, you can sever off another piece from parcel 1 to gain access would be the other alternative, or some degree or some creative thinking there. But that's, I guess, where my concern was, is that if these aren't, I realize you maybe don't have a draft plan of subdivision or a draft of what you propose to do, but we don't even have a necessarily conceptual idea of what you were thinking with regards to this property. We don't have a clear understanding or requirement in the staff recommendation with regards to that other property that adjacent, and I'm assuming it's the property that's kind of that L-shaped part that's to the upper right of the sketch that we have accessing Barrack Road. Does the developer, to use the right word, that's currently looking to purchase this property, do they currently own that property? I guess is the question.
Yeah, to the chair, the conditions that are identified in the staff report, as well as the other committee member identified, that condition secures that there is another frontage along a local road. With that being said, that would then permit severance of the property, and we would not be creating necessarily a sterile property. There are multiple different ways to address fire department's comments. Not necessarily do we need a second access to do that, to be able to facilitate development. Right now, the property is zoned institutional at the parcel in the middle as well. So there still would be opportunities to utilize that parcel, even if, for instance, it got rezoned for one single detached dwelling. So creating the severance and creating these lots is not potentially creating a lot that's sterile, especially with the conditions that that the staff have recommended as part of providing an access to Barrack Road.
But correct me if I'm wrong from fellow members, it was merely an undertaking is the recommendation as opposed to a condition to actually get it somewhere. I'm not saying that has to be that spot. There's, like you say, there's multiple ways. From my concern, it's just define one of those avenues so that way we could be assured that this won't become a sterile lot. Because even if you were to build a single detached dwelling on here, if you don't have access to Barrack Road or to Steele Street to the east, you can't have access to West Side Road because the ministry will not allow it. So even if you wanted to build one house in the middle of that, you couldn't do that either. The only thing you could do is leave it institutional, and you'd have to sever off a piece of parcel 1, I guess. That is a possibility. But I guess that's all I'm trying to say is there's not even a proposed way to get around this. We're relying on, and I did look back at the zoning bylaw amendment application. That's where I kind of understood that there was this potential piece of property that you could have access to Barrack, but I don't see it in this application. And yes, it could get addressed at a further rezoning of parcel 2 whenever that time comes, but then at that point that lot is already there and existing. And if it can't get created, then it won't. And then you got this lot that's been severed that gets stuck in perpetuity as a separate lot until some other person comes along and figures out another way to get around the requirements. And that's my only concern is that I think that should be part of the proposal and one of the conditions that you gain as part of this severance access to one of those other points. Whatever it happens to be, but that should be a condition, I think, of severing to make this lot, so that way we know it's not going to be sterile and you can at least address the access point, fire department aside. If there's other ways to get around that, that's fine, but that may come to the rezoning part, because if it's just a single detached dwelling, then you wouldn't need that secondary access for the fire department. So that, I guess that's where I'm going with that point. I just think it's a little premature at this stage to not have that, at least as a condition. If it was a condition, I think I could possibly support this, but without having that as a condition, I know there's a lot of what ifs and things you can do, but I just want to see something that says you can do it, as opposed to it's possible, we can do this, maybe, we can try this, there's a bunch of different ways to do it, but because like I say, once we make this decision, then it's there. So that, I guess that's where I'm going. I don't know, Eric, if you had another question. Okay. So is there any other members that have any questions or comments? Gary.
Mr. Chair, well, your comments reminded me of, and particularly Ms. Landry's, that there may be other ways to do that. I don't know if EP is one of them too, environmental protection for the woodlot. But I think it's important that if there are those other potential conditions that could resolve that issue if you can't get the access, that they should be perhaps listed, only because I think that may be meaningful to people on all properties touching the woodlot. So I'm curious too if through you to our planner, if the church retains a disconnected piece of property, in this case the woodlot, under their ownership, does that become a separate property that no longer is not taxable?
Through the chair to the committee member. Yeah, I think you're absolutely correct. It becomes a separate parcel that is no longer part of the church and likely then becomes subject to property tax. What that would be on a vacant parcel, it may be negligible, but it wouldn't be afforded the same treatment as a church would.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. So if there's no other questions of committee members, I'll turn it over to members of the public. Does anyone wish to speak to this application this evening? Not seeing any. So with that, like I say, that's my concerns and my 2 cents worth with regards to these applications. I know what the staff's recommendations are. I personally would like to see it as a condition that whatever the proposal is, that access be gained as part of this completion of this part. I'm not saying you can't have it. I want to make sure that you can gain the access off of barrack or steel, something that's appropriate to satisfy the servicing of a potential lot, whether it be a residential, be it a plan of subdivision, a development, or whatever. So I guess really just taking the staff's recommended condition 2B, I guess it would be, instead of a written undertaking, that access, that it be a condition that an access point from parcel 2 to a recognized street that can be accessed. Doesn't necessarily have to be barrack, it could be steel, I guess. There's multiple lots there that cut across. I think that should be changed accordingly to make that a requirement or a condition of the consent. The rezoning part, I guess, once that completes, it would all be zoned institutional, whatever that provisional zoning is, in which case they would still have to come back for another rezoning application to change it to whatever the proposal is at that time, which is fine. So yeah, I guess that's really the crux of my concerns with regards to this particular application. So I don't know if anyone wants to bring forward a recommendation, or got a question, Eric?
Bring it forward. Once I pull it up. It's B01, right?
And just before you read it off, I guess that clarity would be, condition would only be on B01. That's the mid parcel 2. It wouldn't be on 3. The easement or right of way across to 2 to 3 would be.
I have a draft that
Okay.
I'll read out and we can go from there maybe.
Okay, I was just wondering in case you wanted to lump 1 and 2 together.
Okay. Yeah. Let's see how this looks.
And actually, just before you start, does the applicant have anything further you want to add before we go to a recommendation?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I just wanted to quickly note that through communication I'm having electronically right now from one of the project managers with the developer, he has indicated that the developer has a conditional offer to purchase and sale for 484 Barrack Road. And it's conditional on the severance proceeding. So we're amenable to the condition that I think is going to be brought forward by one of the committee members.
Very good, thank you. So with that, Eric?
Application BO1-25-PC and application BO2-25PC be granted subject to the conditions outlined in the staff report. I'll read out all the conditions. The BO1-25PC and BO2-25PC be granted subject to the conditions One, that the applicant provides the Secretary Treasurer with the deeds for the conveyance of the subject parcels, including a registrable legal description of the subject parcels and a copy of the deposit reference plan for use in the issuance of the certificate of consent. Two, that prior to depositing the reference plan, the following amendments are made to the satisfaction of city staff. That the applicant 2A, that the applicant apply for and obtain an easement for access to Part 3 over Part 2, which maintains the Ontario Ministry of Transportation required 14-meter setback from Highway 58. 2B, that access to the satisfaction of city staff that access be provided to the satisfaction of city staff to Part 2 of the approved severance sketch. 2C, an 11-meter by 11-meter site triangle is included at the intersection of Barrack Road and West Side Road from Parcel 1 is included for conveyance to the City of Port Colborne. 3, that the appropriate zoning be secured through the application D14-12-24. 4, that a final certification fee of $400 per application for a total of $800 payable to the City of Port Colborne is submitted to the Secretary Treasurer. 5, that all conditions of consent be completed by September 10th, 2027. For the following reasons, the application is consistent with the provincial planning statement, conforms to the Niagara official plan and the City of Port Colborne official plan, and after conditions are cleared, will comply with the provisions of zoning bylaw 6575-30-18 as amended.
Thank you. Can I get a seconder to that? Dave? I only have one question. With regards to the easement, would that have to be like an easement in perpetuity where they need an application to come back, or is that something that we can kind of, I'm assuming if it happened would be an easement in perpetuity, in which case would come back to us, but otherwise they could address it in some other fashion, I'm assuming. Is that,
Through the chair, our thought is that that would be coming back as an application to this committee. Yep.
So then, with regards to, okay, so yeah, it'd be, so they'd have to go through that process, get the easement, and, okay, fair enough. Very good. I don't have anything else unless anyone's got any comments. All those in favor? That'd be carried. Thank you.
Thank you.
Madam Secretary, A14 now? All right. It's all yours.
Our next application is minor variance application A1425PC for the land municipally known as 3334 Nugent Road located in the agricultural zone as established by the zoning bylaw. The owner, Call It Gravel Willie, is requesting relief from the provisions of the zoning bylaw to permit the construction of a new accessory structure, notwithstanding the following: that a maximum height of 8.1 meters be permitted, whereas a maximum height of 6 meters is required. Given the information in the recommendation report, planning staff recommends application A1425PC be granted. As the application is minor in nature, it is appropriate for the development of the site, it is desirable and in compliance with the general intent and purpose of the zoning bylaw, and it is desirable and in compliance with the general intent and purpose of the official plan. That concludes correspondence for this application.
Thank you. Is the applicant or the agent for the applicant here this evening? The podium on my right, your left. Please and thank you. There's a little red button in the middle of that gray bar in front of you. There you go. Is there anything further you'd like to add at this time?
No.
Thank you. Is there any members have any questions? Not seeing any. Is there any members of the public that wish to speak to this application? Not seeing any. Has anyone got a recommendation?
With respect to application A1425PC, in the matter of lands on concession 4, part lot 31 in the city of Port Colborne, that the Committee of Adjustment recommend application A1425PC be granted. 1, that the applications are minor in nature. 2, they are appropriate for the development of the site. 3, they are desirable in compliance with the general intent purpose of the zoning bylaw. 4, they are desirable in compliance with the general intent and purpose of the official plan.
Thank you. I have a seconder to that. Eric? Sorry, you weren't raising your hand?
No, I was. I just had a.
Okay. You have a question after?
Yeah, I'll have a
Okay.
question.
Question's yours.
Okay. sorry, I just want to make sure if you said concession, you said a different address. I just want to make sure the address was correct, and how what you said. Was it read out correctly? That's all I wanted to confirm.
I seen it as 334 Nugent Road.
Because I think you said concession to. No. Okay, that is okay.
He said it was concession 4, which is in the
Park
legal
lot
description,
31.
Okay.
not on concession 2, yes.
Just wanted to confirm that.
Okay.
That was correct.
All right, very good. Any other questions or comments? All those in favor? That'll be carried. There's a 20-day waiting period, but other than that, you can start the process. You won't get a permit until after the process is concluded, but thank you. Madam Secretary, the next application, please.
Our last two applications are consent applications B0725PC and its related application B0825PC. In B0725PC for the lands municipally known as 3077 Highway 3, the owner Thomas Lawrence is requesting consent to sever for the purposes of creating a new residential and agricultural lot. The subject parcels are shown as parts 1 and 3 on the proposed sketch. In B0825PC for the lands municipally known as 953 Cedar Bay Road, the owner Crystal McNay is requesting for a boundary adjustment for the purposes of retaining part 2 of the aforementioned severance. The subject parcels are shown as parts 2 and 4 on the proposed sketch. Given the recommendation reports, planning staff recommend that the respective consent applications be granted, subject to the conditions outlined in the staff reports dated September 5th, 2025. That concludes correspondence for these applications.
Thank you. I know we put them together, and there's two different applicants. I'm assuming you're all sitting together. You can all come up, or whoever wants to come up to represent both of those. And I guess I'll afford you some opening comments first, and we'll kind of go from there. So a little red button in the middle of that gray bar there. Perfect. The floor is yours. Assuming you want to add anything.
I'm sorry?
Is there any comments you wish to add at this time?
No, thank you.
Okay. All right, very good. Thank you. Is there any committee members that have questions with regards to these applications? All right, seeing none from our committee members, I have a litany. And I guess I'll kind of go through some of the comments that made things a little confusing for my part. So I guess initially, the initial application for B07, the sketch had just two parts, part 1 and part 2, the front part and the rear part. So online, that's the second sketch was the one that was posted. However, the staff report referred to it as part 1 and part 2. But then when I read the staff recommendation and the description of part 2, it didn't seem to really match part 3 on the revised sketch, and it referenced part 2. So that's where I kind of got confused a little bit. After reading through everything, I guess I concluded or understood kind of what you wanted. The challenge that I have, and I'm not necessarily against proceeding with B07, which is basically breaking it into 2. However, the other application, B08, basically addresses Cedar Bay Road, right? Yes, addresses the property on Cedar Bay Road. However, you're technically severing a piece off, but the application doesn't really talk about that. And so at the end of the day, in my opinion, both of these applications should have referenced Highway 3. And basically there was 2 severances for Highway 3. The problem is the way it's been presented kind of is, I don't want to say deceiving, it's more confusing, because the application itself talks about the property or parcel 4, but it doesn't talk about who owns the part where you're severing it off and having permission to do that. I'm assuming you're somewhat related, maybe not, or you know each other and you have an agreement. Okay, so you have an agreement, and that's fine, but the application says they're the ones applying on their property, but they're taking your land.
Exactly.
And that's not in the application that way, and that's where I have a problem with the second. I'm not necessarily saying I'm against it, but what I am saying is that it wasn't properly notified and prepared for the public to address that. So at this point in time, my recommendation is from my perspective, we can proceed with 7, but 8, I think re-notification should be done. The application should be amended to show that the owner of the Highway 3 property, which I'm assuming is you, is granting them. They can still act as the agents on your behalf to make the application. I'm assuming they're probably paying for it because they want the land and that's part of the agreement. That's fine. That's none of our business, but they can still act as the agent, but you have to grant them the authority to act on your behalf with regards to this particular matter. And the way it was presented, it's not presented that way. And that's where I have the concern. Just like the earlier application, because these are all legal matters, I just want to make sure there's legal authority for them to go and take your piece of land. And in the application that was presented to us, it's not shown that way, is where I'm going at. I understand there's probably an agreement, I would assume. So that's part is fine, but the application, they can make the application, but it should be you're the one that's granting them to be agents on your behalf, to act on your behalf, to parcel out that little piece and adjust that boundary to give to them, sell to them, whatever. But to merge those two together. That's my primary concern with regards to the way these two applications were. The secondary one is, again, the staff report, if that had been all as the two together, very similar to that first one we had this evening where there's two severances for the one parcel. They could have combined it all together and say, okay, you're retaining part 3, you're severing off part 1 and 2. Part 1 is under this application, part 2 is under this for a boundary adjustment, and we'd get a kind of a better picture of what you're actually trying to do.
When I first started it, they were in the
Just, if you could, just push the button there in front of you again. There you go.
When I first started this whole application, they were not in the picture. They realized that I was severing the land. They wanted to build a house, which apparently does not meet exactly the requirements. And then they approached me if they could buy that little extra piece to make it where they can build. So I said yes. So it was kind of like, right in the middle of things. And I put it under the same application, which I understood that I could. So sorry about the...
No, and for the record, that is fine. I fully understand what you're doing. The paperwork that we got that is posted online doesn't reflect that. Is my only concern. So what we get is what the public gets, and we get a staff report with some background with a recommendation, but that's where it got confusing to me afterwards. I figured that's kind of what it was, but it's just doing that process of getting all that paperwork aligned moving forward. And Gary, you got a question?
Yeah, I'm just wondering because this may or not have happened before, and we didn't pick up on it through the years. But I'm wondering through you to the chief planner, in whether it's 08 or 07, and as is usually stated almost as a template in these things, is the line that the applicant provides the secretary treasurer with deeds for the conveyance of the subject parcel or a registrable legal description of the subject parcel and a copy of the deposit check and reference plan. So is that line to ensure that anybody that's filling out any applications could be either not the correct people, they didn't file the paperwork right, but what really matters is this is a planning matter about land, not about people, and the legalities cleared up are underlying in every application because you ask for number 1. So when all the other conditions are fulfilled, despite who was here, who represented who, or if there wasn't the proper, because I think you're right, but I think you're dealing on the legal side, not the planning side. And I would argue that this clarifies it, because none of the consents happen unless the legalities of what's really happened, which will mean another name here, is cleared up. And I just thought that maybe this is not an accident, that it's in every consent, because the legal will follow the land planning version, and the appropriate names, ownership, and all of that will come afterwards. And if you're a neighbor, whoever is buying that property or owns that property or is attaching land to that property can't be an issue of the neighbors who you're talking about getting notice, because this is a planning matter, not a personal matter. And so it's about land as opposed to notice. If you were going to object, you would object anyways, no matter whose name is on the planning documents that you receive as a potential objector.
Through the chair to the member, yeah, I think that's absolutely correct. What the committee is tasked with is creating the parcel of land. The legal piece that's done through land title and through lawyer will sort out the ownership and the transfer of the ownership. Now, with respect to how this application came in and who's the applicant versus who the landowner is, this is done based on, we looked at this before this was accepted in discussions with the landowner and then the applicant for BO8. And different municipalities have a different approach on this. So we've got a mix through our history here in Port Colborne of either having the person who wishes to seek the parcel to have merged be the applicant, so what we've got in this case with BO8, or the scenario where the landowner who is going to sell the piece is the applicant. We've done it both ways. Other municipalities in Niagara have done it both ways. As to whether which, there may be a way that is preferable, and certainly if it's the desire of this committee to see BO8 be led by the landowner, we can certainly work to quickly repost the notice for that, update the report, update the application, and come back at the next Committee of Adjustment meeting having the landowner for what would be parcel 2 make the application. But ultimately, I think the report is going to recommend the same outcomes. It's going to look at the same conditions for that consent. So that's where we would be going.
Gary?
I guess I'm wanting to do that if, as you say, we've done it both ways. So the applicant didn't do anything wrong. The neighbors had the notification. The legalities are going to be sorted out. And if we follow that logic of doing it over, it's another potentially delay of a month. It may be the potential refiling of a fee. And as you say, to the neighbors, it's not going to make a difference. The only difference will be who the applicant is. But I think more importantly, unless we have a policy, we're deciding which way was right or wrong based on both ways were common practice in the city of Port Colborne. So until you change the process and tell the planning department that this is the way it needs to be going forward, there's no sense in people who did it what arguably is the correct way, because the city of Port Colborne's correct way has been either way. So they didn't do anything abnormal here. And we know from what the chief planner has said that the legals do get sorted out. I don't think you penalize people who filed correctly, and our planning department accepted the filing. And they have a reasonable explanation as to why it's filed that way. Thank you.
Just through to the chair. I would actually, I'd like to just defer to the chair on this in terms of what I think Chair has a little more experience on the consent end than I do. And if there's a preferred route that this committee would like to see in the future, then let's pick it, and we're happy to accommodate that. And this can come back. There would be no refiling fee. We'll put another sign up. We'll be back here in 30 days.
If I might, just before we go to you, Eric. The concern that I have is the application on B08 is to take someone else's land. And there's no authorization to do that in the application. My concern, that's a slipper. I don't care who makes the application. It could be those two, it could be someone totally independent. I really don't care that part. But whoever owns the land has to sign off that we have an agreement to give you part of this land, here's the description. That's the part I'm concerned with. Because you say it will get straightened out down the road with the legalese. I'm not so sure nowadays. Because someone could go to the land registry office and say, here, look, I got this severance. My lawyer says this, bam, bam, bam. And then the next thing you know, he's missing half of his parcel of land because it's been registered. I'm not saying it won't get caught. I just want to be a part of that process of potentially not getting caught. When we know right off the hop, this piece of land, who owns that piece of land, needs to at least have some acknowledgement in there to say, yep, we have this agreement, they're acting on my behalf to carve out this piece. For whatever reason, don't care. But they have the authority from the legal landowner to do this. It would be no different than someone comes and wants a variance and they put a variance on your property to your neighbor and you know nothing about it because you didn't know. It gets granted and poof, you got this variance on your neighbor's lot, and then you go buy it from them cheap because you've already done these changes and they don't know about it. That's the only part that I'm concerned about, is that the legal description or the legal landowner was not part of the application process. I don't care which one of them applies. That's irrelevant. And whether you put the sign on that road versus this road, we can argue that one. And I think that's where we've done it multiple different ways. That part I'm not overly concerned with. It's just the fact that the applicant, the owner of the property, should have signed off to say they have legal authority to act on my behalf to make this application, and I agree with it. That's the only point that I understand in this case you're here and you're telling us that. That's fine, that's great. But I just don't want to go down that slippery slope of the landowner needs to have some acknowledgement in there somewhere that they're agreeing to it. That's the part that I have concern. Eric.
Through you, I just know that the Planning Act has permitted applicants now that allows you to make an application if you have an agreement of purchase and sale. So that would be a situation in which the landowner doesn't necessarily do these, doesn't apply, but the purchaser could. What could be a potential solution that works, that can kind of satisfy both, is that maybe an agreement of purchase and sale be provided as a condition. That's all that needs to be done.
I think that would help, because then at least you know they have some legal standing with regards to that, and you make it a condition that they're buying that land, they now own it, and therefore it is now them that's making the application. I understand that would be another remedy, I guess, as well. But or we could make that a condition here in this particular case. But yes, but that's really my concern, is that we start down that slippery slope of allowing people to make an application that you don't know if the landowner has agreed to this or not. That's my only point. And I just don't want to get in the middle of that argument. I realize it's more of a legal thing than a planning thing, but we have an application form for a reason, and we should follow through that process to the applicant.
Can you start that next week?
Sorry?
Can we restart this process next week then, so I can go ahead with this?
So with regards to that, that's something we are discussing.
Okay.
So that's, next week, probably not. There is a waiting period regardless, and there is some other process that needs to be done. But do you have a question?
Yeah, I'm just in agreement with what Eric said. I mean, like, if you can have your lawyer draft up, agreement of purchase and sale, sign off, you're here and now.
It'll be done anyways.
Both parties are in agreement. They're both standing right in front of us. regardless of the application, they're standing in front of us agreeing to it. So we know that the agreement's there. Your lawyers sign, make up the agreement of purchase and sale, lot numbers, roll numbers, everything like that. Bob's your uncle. Why postpone it for a month when we really don't have to? And like you said, now let's discuss what we want going forward. But to hold them off a month for something that may have happened before, could have happened before, did happen before, let's fix it, but let's get them going to, I guess, get your house built. Or you want to start on it sooner than later, so, yeah, and then we can fix the problem post these people. So that would be my suggestion, to go with what Eric had said.
Well, like I say, the only element that is part of the Planning Act is the proper notice. And I guess, based on what I'm hearing, the committee feels that proper notice has been given. Although if you looked at a sign, one could assume they already had the land purchased and that was theirs and they're just merging it together. All I'm saying that this may be not a great example of why it's a concern, but I just want to stress once again the importance of making sure everything's aligned, the proper signatures are there, so that way when it comes to us, there's no question whatsoever who has the authority to do this, and this is what you want to do. I appreciate the clarification up front regarding the staff report, but I look at the staff report and the legal description, it clearly says Part 2. And if you looked at Part 2 and the description in the staff report, it says fronting on Cedar Bay Road. It doesn't front on Cedar Bay Road, Part 2. On the original sketch it does, but on the sketch that was given to us, it didn't. And that's the point I'm trying to make, is that we need to be very careful that everything is clear, concise. There is a legal ramification to what we do here, and I just want to make sure that I can't stress that enough, that although that's not our total obligation, it is part of our obligation to make sure that things are being done in accordance with the Planning Act and statutes of the province of Ontario. That's all I'm trying to get at. So with that, I don't believe there's any member of the public that wish to speak to this. Is there any closing comments that the applicants wish to have on this?
No, thank you.
Okay. I realize this was a lot of maybe gibberish, mumbo jumbo, I don't know. But it's from my perspective, it's a technical thing that I just wanted to make sure we're all on the same page. It not only protects us, but it also protects you, because someone could come down the road and say, oh, I thought it was this, but it was really this. And then they file an appeal and they make your life heck afterwards, right? In this case, I doubt it. But unfortunately, when precedents like this come up, I just want to be clear that we need to be very specific about what's being asked, what we're granting, and that all the dots are dotted and all the T's are crossed. That's all I'm getting at. So with that, does someone have a recommendation you want to make? And if you want to lump them both in together, if you want to do them separately, you can do them either other.
I'll do it. Okay. So an application BO7-25-PC and BO8-25-PC being concession 1, part lot 12 in the city of Port Colborne, on reference plan 30R 11444, formerly in the township of Humberstone, currently in the city of Port Colborne on part 1, municipally known as 953 Cedar Bay Road, and then I'll do the other one. Concession 1, part lot 12 in the city of Port Colborne. That the applicant, so that the BO8-25-PC and BO7-25-BC be granted, subject to the conditions as such, that the applicant provides the Secretary Treasurer with the deeds for the conveyance of the subject parcel, a registrable legal description of the subject parcel, and a copy of the deposited reference plan for use in the issuance of the certificate of consent. 2, that a final certification fee of $400 payable to the city of Port Colborne is submitted to the Secretary Treasurer. 3, that drainage apportionment agreement be completed by the city drainage superintendent or by an approved engineer at the cost of the applicant. A copy of the deposit plan must be delivered to the drainage superintendent through the planning department for the apportionment agreement to be completed. That all conditions of consent be completed by September 10th, 2027. If in regards to application B08, that the applicant solicitor shall provide written confirmation to the Secretary Treasurer of the Community Adjustment that under the Planning Act, the severed lands will merge with the adjacent lands known as 953 Cedar Bay Road. That immediately following the registration of the transfer of the allotted addition lands, the applicant owner shall register an application to consolidate parcels in order to include the lot addition with abutting lands municipally known as 953 Cedar Bay Road. The Secretary Treasurer shall accept to the satisfaction of this condition and undertake it from Ontario Solicitor to register the application to consolidate parcels within 60 days of following registration of the transfer of the lot additional lands. And that the owner of the remnant lands that are and the subject lands that are going to be subject to the lot addition provide an agreement of purchase and sale to the owner of I'm assuming it's 953 Cedar Bay Road. I think that for the following reasons, that the application is consistent with the provincial planning statement and conforms to the Niagara official plan. City of Colborne official plan will comply with the provisions of zoning bylaw 6575/30/18 as amended.
Thank you. Any seconder to that? Gary? Questions or comments? Does the applicant have any comments or questions? Not seen. All right. All those in favor? They'll be carried, both of them. So there is a waiting period. I believe it's 20 days. There is a little bit of legwork you got to do just to satisfy some of those conditions, but I don't think they're too extreme. And you should be building in maybe a month.
Yeah, right. Instead of starting.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, that concludes the applications for this evening. Is there any other business? Gary.
Thank you, Worship. I was just thinking tonight, only because I knew the background of the Barrack Road file, that Eric was kind enough to read out the extra peculiar conditions of that, as there was public interest in it in the room. But if you came here, whether you got a notification and you came to listen, or whether your neighbor told you because you were outside the area, you come here, you sit down. We get these pre-written sub-conditions.
Yes.
We may agree with them, so we don't bring them up, which happens often. And so people in the audience really don't, until they hear us read out this, have no viewing of that. I'm almost thinking, as I watched tonight, that now that we have the screen, if some of those things should be, some of these conditions should be put up there. Because the average member of the public may see one of those conditions, and it prompts them to ask a question. But they don't see any of those pre-written conditions. And so if you came here, I'd seen somebody in the back on this particular one nod no, but the yes to her no was actually in there. But it didn't get espoused, and well, in this case, I was certain what she thought wasn't a good idea got clarified and fixed in here. And so, I don't know, Eric, if you know this, but how can we allow the public to, like, you don't want to send this out because it looks like everything's pre-canned. I mean, in the old days, what we had was this, and we had a complimentary no. And we chose from. But yeah, Eric, if you've got a solution to that, but I just worry that they're not seeing some detail unless we let them know. They might get satisfied when they hear us read out the conditions, but it seems to me that they're sitting there not knowing about this process in the first place, and they come here and they don't even know we may be fixing their problem before it is. But maybe Eric, did you have something to add?
Just before we go to Eric or Eric, to your point, that page basically is already there in the staff report. Unless we change it, in which case we did hear where he read out and added an additional condition or changed the wording a little bit. The challenge about posting that up there so they can see it, one, they probably wouldn't be able to read it because it'd be so small. But secondly, if you've changed it, I don't know how you showed up there that we've changed it in real time. I'm not disagreeing that if there's a better.
Read it out.
Yeah.
Change it, because they'll hear the debate though.
Yes, and I think we did in this case here.
Yes.
And in the case where we didn't deviate from what was in the staff report, which is posted online, we just did it verbatim and basically referenced the staff report and just those points are there. So I don't know how better way to do it. I know in the past, we would get our secretary treasurer to read the entire staff report. Along the way, we decided to condense it a bit. But that could be something if we wish we can get to read the full staff recommendation aloud as part of the summary, we can do that. But Eric.
Through you, Mr. Chair. There are municipalities that definitely do that on their committee of adjustment. They put it on the screen. They provide almost, off the top of my head, Town of Pelham does it, and I believe Thorold does as well. They'll provide it's almost like when Taya goes through and says all those things out loud, she would essentially be doing the same thing, but there's kind of it's almost like a little mini presentation with staff's comments, and then they just show the recommended motion.
I like that. I like it more so if I could, because
I guess what we could do is that one portion of the staff report where it's the recommendation part, we can probably just have that on the screen. Whether you read it initially or not, you can leave that kind of up there. Now, unless you have a presentation that it'll come down and then we'll have to go back up.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't have an issue with that. It's just that this one's fairly short. When you get one that's 2 pages long, I'm not sure how you get it all up there. That would be a challenge. You'd probably have to figure out a way to scroll it, but yeah.
That there's somebody who has seen best practices elsewhere.
Yeah.
Because what we never do is, you may watch a council meeting as councilors, right? They pick up some hints on how they do it.
Yeah.
But nobody ever sees somebody else's committee of adjustment meeting.
Yeah. Okay. So that's something we can consider. Dave.
Not saying that there's nobody that pays attention to what this committee does, but usually there's just a few people in the audience.
Yes.
What would it take just to make copies of the planning report and the resolution of decision? Put them at the back of the room. Like, I mean, you probably only need, and you know, there was 5 things today.
Yes.
So you only have to make like 2 or 3 of each. Because, it's, there's not going to be 20, 30, 40, 50 people here. We know when that's going to happen, because you can just tell by applications, you know, people are going to come forward. But for minor stuff like this, and, you know, minor to us, and it's major to them, but just to have a couple of people that are here that are interested and want to know, I want to read the planning report, and because it aligns with, you know, what your decision is going to be. I want to know how did you come to that decision? Well, read the planning report, right? But
It may also avoid that at the podium, because.
yeah. So, and I know it's old school instead of having it on the screens, but there's quite a few people in town that are.
And to your point, I think if they've come all the way here to listen to it, It's a few cents on a piece of paper that you just hit print a few times and it's there and lay them at the back. Eric?
Through you, I agree with the intention. I guess I'm kind of the opposite opinion in terms of making more physical copies. I think just throwing on the screen should be sufficient, and if you can't, you should be able to access it online. I get it, but I also think it's also creating more work on our staff when they're already running around, because there's like last minute comments coming probably from the MPCA or some other external agency, and they're dealing with last minute stuff from applicants and whatnot before the meeting. So I think there are some things that we don't see as committee members on staff. So I don't know, maybe staff can speak to it, but I think that's just maybe potentially an unnecessary step at an added cost. That's my opinion.
I'll go to Eric first. He wants to.
No, thank you. I think we're open to supporting the committee however they think is best. We could, with respect to a hard copy, we could make we could bring one hard copy of each report up and we could set the committee room up in the back and sort of lay them out there for people as a reference. But we could bring that and put it on the screen. I mean, we could do any number of things, but I know what where this started with Councillor Bruno, and there was quite a few folks here tonight, and then I think upon hearing the conditions, they didn't go ahead and read them in the report ahead of the meeting, and that's fine. But upon finding out that there was going to be conditions around this, there was maybe a sense of relief on their part, and so yeah, if that was communicated, you know, do we think it would change? Would they still come to the meeting? I think they probably would. Yeah.
Garrett, just your button there. You don't, Garrett?
I guess I'm still supportive of Councillor Elliott's point, because I think about whenever the municipality puts out things online or a survey, they always say, or copies are available at City Hall or at the public library. So they're still having regard to the fact that not everybody's there yet with electronic. And to that extent, I think our first obligation is about democracy, transparency, and all that. And I know that anybody who wants it just on there isn't opposed to that. I'm not saying that. But it might be interesting just if that is laid out somewhere. I mean, you'll actually have a living experiment over the next 5 or 6 months to see how many are looking at it or referencing it or you know, about this number too, right? I think for the amount of paper, if you're going to put it up there, you've already typed it in a platform, and so I think we could do it. I wish I had known that a long time ago, what Eric said about Thorold and the other municipality, but I don't know if you witnessed it live, whether it was helpful, whether you saw people looking at it, but I can't help believe that providing the option for a few sheets of paper is not a bad thing.
Of that. The only reason I offered is because when we have train meetings, what do you hear from the crowd? I can't see it, right?
Yeah.
Like multiple people. If you don't have a front row seat to read the screen.
Or can you repeat that?
Yeah, the people in the back are like trying to, like, what does that say? So, and for this, and like Gary had said earlier, you know, when people hear the decision, then it's like, oh, okay, now I get it. Well, they might not have to stay, not that we don't want people to sit in the chairs, but they might be able to read it ahead of time and go, yeah, okay, my issue with this has been looked after, I can go, right? So it just gives, and like you said, you're only talking 6 pages, 8 pages, you know, depending on the number of applications. So just food for thought. If we say no, No, that's fine. I just thought when you were talking about somebody that heard it, and then I thought, well, if they read it, it'd be easier on them. So that's it.
Well, I'd be willing I'll make a motion that we have at least one copy, whether it's multiples or not, that we can have of each application of the staff report at the back. If you want to, we can flip it open to the final page where the recommendation is. I wouldn't put the other page there, but because that's basically just reiterating what's in the staff report, but just one copy of each, and then we can flip it open to, and then it could just be the 3 or 4 that are there. And so I'll put forward a motion if someone wants to second that, to make that as at least a starting point, and we'll see.
If it could be, so if you walk in and you see them, there's a place for them, like, because if you walk in, like, you could say that, you could make that announcement in your speech at the beginning of the meeting, but then you got people getting up and going over there and talking about it and all that stuff. If they knew ahead of time, like it's at the back, you can still remind them. I don't know if a sign or a table or whatever would be the idea. Yeah, I'm all for that.
Okay, so I'll move that we do that, at least one copy going forward. If I can get a seconder to that. Seconder to that, Dave. Questions or comments? Young guy, come on, come on.
Well, yeah, I think we should still have, I think that would be more, like putting it on the screen would be more of a catch, like more people would see it. Like if you're going to put one out there, like you said, like some people might not even see it. Some people might just walk by it because there's too many people looking at it. Like I can see it being, I get the intentions and I like it. I think it's just practically not going to work. That's just my opinion. I think putting it up on the screen would be better and would also work for us. I don't have to, I could have it there while I'm looking at the sketch instead of, it could be useful for all of us, but that's my opinion. But it just might require more staff time. So that's also a concern.
I'm open to a friendly amendment to add that also being on the screen. If that's an easier way, it's just that then you're going to need 2 people. Otherwise, because you're focused on this and taking the minutes and doing that, we need that extra person up there to scroll through the applications. That's the only problem with doing it that way. I know we're trying to minimize staff by not necessarily having someone from the planning department here if we don't need it. We never in the past, I know prior to COVID, we never had a planning person here other than the sector, other than when we requested it. But it's just, if that extra person's there to scroll through it, that's simple enough, but yeah.
Just on that, like I referenced the town of Pelham, but also their committee of adjustment has engineering there. They have like three, they'll have someone who's working the presentation, the clerk who's dealing with or the secretary treasurer that's dealing with the applications, and then they have multiple staff to deal with it. So it's a little bit different than here. So that just so you know.
Sure, Taya.
To the chair, just as somebody who would be doing the actual work, I think putting it up on the screen would probably be easier. We have clickers are able to change the screens just from where I'm sitting, so I can still run things without having to be over there. I think with Member Bruno's point with just having the physical copies, if we have it up on the screen large enough where people can still read it at the back, I know that we've had Canal Days briefings in here with packed full of people and people are able to see it from the back row. I think if we're able to still have it at a size legible where we can have the recommendation and I can still sit here and click through it, it'll avoid the need for people to kind of get up and look at the recommendation report and talk about everything because it'll be up on the screen relevant for when people we're talking about it. So I think, just personally speaking, that having the digital copy may be a little bit better than just the physical one, since I'm still able to kind of control when that's happening, and at the same time, it would be less work for me. But that's just my opinion.
My only concern has ever been, I mean, if we had the technology and there was another screen in this room and you could have that up there, that would be the perfect solution. You'd never need paper because the active stuff would be in the active screens, and those that aren't interested in reading in detail that would have a lovely way of being non-intrusive, go up there. You know, we have the benefit of looking at the screens and looking back at this. They don't. It's just why I still wanted to go with the one copy, if you don't mind, because, I mean, I'd be willing at some point in budget or whatever to have another screen put in this chamber. So static stuff that could be there could just sit there. When you walk in, it's there about the meeting. And I don't think it would work even just for Committee of Adjustment. Could work for anything else, that something's published electronically here in the chamber. If you're here ahead of the meeting, you can do it. But for now, we don't have that. So maybe Taya and Eric's point, we can evolve to it. But in the beginning, for the costless of paper, I'd like to still do it the same way for now. But what will be interesting is if it gets used, it'd be a great reason to advocate for that separate one.
Okay.
Just to add on to Member Bruno's point through the chair, we do have a little TV screen downstairs on the first floor that has like a static viewing of all the events and things going on in Port Colborne. I'm sure that's something we could talk to IT about maybe placing something up here regarding like putting maybe like the sequence of events.
Board, like
but like even like a sequence of events
Yeah.
for like the agenda for City Council and Committee of Adjustment, or maybe going through and having like the recommendation at the back of the screen. I did want to note there are two TVs that do point towards the audience. There's not two TVs that just point towards us. They can also see as well.
No, really. But if something's on that.
Yeah,
usually I know.
for sure. So it really kind of just depends. If I'm reading out the delegation, I'd be happy to have the recommendation up there. More often than not, a lot of people do tend to come in person, but I'm sure we can do like a test sequence of events to see how we can do anything. But yeah, there is like a small little monitor that's on the first floor where they have like a static list of events and things going on in Port Colborne. I'm sure IT can figure out a way to maybe put one at like even just the back corner there where people can look and see the sequence of the agenda, like how I give you guys the cover, and then also like a recommendation of just like a list of things going on that can just like sit there and I can scroll through it while we're sitting here.
So let's do.
Yeah.
Start both and we can mend from there. So with that, the motion on the floor is to do both, to start for the next meeting, and which I won't be here. See how that goes, and then if one way works better than the other, then stick with whatever seems to work, if it makes sense, or neither. I don't know. So with that, all those in favor? Be carried. Is there any other business? Any more other business? Not seeing any. We do have the minutes of the last meeting, August the 13th meeting. We're going to move in a seconder for that. Dave, Eric. Now, it was just the three of you that were here? No, Gary was here. You weren't here. I weren't. Okay. So you can get it onto the floor, but I wasn't here either, so. But there's two of them, so they can still vote and pass it.
That's what I was looking at.
So with that, any questions or comments? All those in favor, that'd be carried with those two. So with that, we will stand adjourned until next month. Thank you.